wasn't much longer after it. And Plessy versus Ferguson, Homer Plessy, a white complexion African-American, a very light complexion African-American, bought a ticket to ride in Louisiana and was told he could not do that because he had to separate the races. Even though he was in the right class, he wasn't within the right race. And the court went on to say, if we weren't happy with this, I'll read the last sentence of this. It says, if this be so, the one that went before, we consider the underlying fallacy of the plaintiff's argument, that's the African Americans, to consist in the assumption that the enforced separation of the two races stamps the colored race with the badge of inferiority. If this be so, it is not by reason of anything found in the Act, but solely because the colored race chooses to put that construction upon it. But it was separate and unequal. I think that's what made it so significant. And this is the court in 1954. You can see the first thing said, okay, all white, all male. That's not a drawback. It actually turned out to be a benefit because it had people representing throughout the country who studied Dred Scott, who studied Plessy versus Ferguson, who studied all the cases that Thurgood Marshall, Charles Hamilton Houston were involved in up until 1954 and issued the Brown decision, which is quite significant. I want to go back before we get to the Brown decision. Before we even had the position of Plessy versus Ferguson, there was a sense that separate and unequal would be okay. Separate and equal would be okay. You may remember Booker T. Washington gave an address in 1895 in Atlanta, the Atlanta Exposition speech, where he begged the whites there, all white audience, not to view the African-American community rising at that time as a threat to whites. And he said this, you can be sure the future is in the past, that you and your families will be surrounded by the most patient, faithful, law-abiding, and unresentful people that the world has seen. As we have proved our loyalty to you in the past, in nursing your children, watching by the sick bed of your mothers and fathers, often following them with tear-dimmed eyes to their graves, so in the future, in our humble way, we should stand by you with a devotion that no foreigner can approach, ready to lay down our lives, if need be, in defense of yours, interlacing our industrial, commercial, civil, and religious life with yours in a way that shall make the interests of both races one. In all things that are purely social, we can be as separate as the fingers, yet one as the hand in all things essential to mutual progress. That was his view in 1895. There's a little-known person at that time who actually graduated that same year from Harvard University as the first African-American with a PhD. He later became known as a native of the state of Barrington, Massachusetts, as W.B. Du Bois. He had a response to what Washington said. And he said this back in 1935, before Brown. He said, the Negro needs neither separate nor mixed schools. What he needs is education. Very interesting. The whole idea, before there was a Brown, before there was affirmative action, his idea was if you give a quality education, it doesn't matter if the schools are mixed or separate. The quality of education matters. And he also, in a sense, followed what became the path of another great person, actually born in 1895, that was Charles Hamilton Houston, native of Washington, D.C., African-American who went to a black high school, now known as Dunbar High School, that produced many luminary African-American, including Ed Brooke, who was a graduate of Dunbar High School. He went on to Amherst College here in Massachusetts. He was in the First World War when he learned that even though he was one of the most brilliant people in his battalion, he was not respected as an officer because he was black. It was there he decided he was going to go to law school. Came to Harvard in 1919, graduated in 1922, and like many of us, had his SJD in 1923, right? Not really. So a brilliant man, and then what did he do? He didn't work for a firm here or in Washington or in New York. He went back to Howard and taught people like Thurgood Marshall and Albert. And the whole idea was to think about what he learned at Harvard, to take it to Howard, to make Howard the plantation, to cultivate all these ideas about justice. And as he said back in the 1930s, education is preparation for the competition of life. And for African Americans to be successful, they'd have to fight to eliminate all the things that we saw. You see these photographs here. Houston had a brilliant idea about how to create a dream of equality. He wanted to show, not just talk about it, write about it, but show pictorially the difference between black and white schools in South Carolina, Topeka, Kansas, and Delaware, and Washington, D.C., and Virginia, so that the Supreme Court would have something clear to see. And he made some very interesting observations to try to eliminate Jim Crow discrimination. And he said before, many people called him the person who killed Jim Crow, but some of us wonder whether Jim Crow killed him, not the Klan. But Charles Houston died at 54 years old in 1950 before the Brown decision was decided, but he laid the groundwork for all of it to happen by the work he did with Thurgood Marshall and others in the 1930s and 1940s. And he also warned African Americans about the issue of courtrooms. Here's what he said: lawsuits mean little unless supported by public opinion. Nobody needs to explain to the Negro the difference between the law in books and the law in action. And he wrote that the walls of prejudice are not going to tumble down just because the courts issued its solemn pronouncement. Let's see what happens with Brown. And here's some data that we found in terms of what was able to give a sense of what it looked like before there was a Brown decision. In 1954, the year that the Brown decision was decided, 82,000 black teachers were responsible for teaching 2 million black children. That's where all the time was spent. 1/2 of all black professionals in 1950 were teachers. I would say a quarter were probably preachers. When you talk about doctors and lawyers and other professionals, they just didn't have the opportunity. They could be educated at places like Howard University, graduate schools, and perhaps places like Fisk University, but there weren't a lot of opportunities there. And here's where Houston, all these photographs are things that Houston took. Finally, in 1954, we had the Brown decision. What's missing in this picture is the obvious rose among all the thorns. Former Judge Constance Baker Motley, who was one of the Brown lawyers in 1954 and was the leading woman on the team once they got the decision. And before he died in 1950, this is what Houston said: this fight for equality of educational opportunity was not an isolated struggle. All our struggles must be tied together and support one another. And here's what the Brown decision made. I hope people will read it over and over again. I want to try to give you a real quick sense about it. The first sentence and about the sixth sentence the fifth sentence are very powerful for me. It says, today education is perhaps the most important function of state and local governments. That's very true, as I said in 1954. What I find most staggering and what it really says is about the fourth sentence. It says, it is the very foundation of good citizenship, education, citizenship. And think about that in the 21st century, the whole idea of how we are, in a sense, taking away citizenship when people can't vote, they can't go to school, they can't get a job, they can't serve in juries. Just think about how much citizenship we've lost from that as we go forward. And then the court, as my book says, made I call it the fatal error, and it may have been an opportunistic error or a necessary error, by remanding these cases, the Brown cases, and urged the courts below to get rid of the racially discriminatory schools, quote, with all deliberate speed. Now that was a phrase that Thurgood Marshall read the case and thought they won. It took a secretary to say, Mr. Marshall, I look at the word deliberate, and deliberate means slow. And in fact, the progress from the court decision in 1954 to actually equality in the schools was incredibly slow because of what followed. Not a lot followed through the year 1954, but in 1955, in August, that's when Emmett Till was killed. The racial violence was still very obvious. He was lynched when he left Chicago and went down to Mississippi in August 1955. And 1955, the same year, that's when Rosa Parks was arrested, and Montgomery, for refusing to give up her seat on the bus, and was arrested. Here's part of the Congressional Manifesto to resist the idea of integration in 1961, when demonstrators said, "In God we trust, not Earl Warren, save our republic, impeach Earl Warren." A lot of things happened, particularly in the South, to try to reverse this. And the massive resistance was known in many places, including in Virginia, when Senator Harry Flood Byrd launched the massive resistance campaign and made it clear that Virginia was not going to allow schools to go. Now what happens is that even though the law had changed, folks did not have to go to the public schools. And in some places like Virginia, they actually closed the schools so that blacks could not go to a public school and whites went to private schools. So Brown was still slow to come. The consequences of Brown are pretty significant. From 1954 to 1965, more than 38,000 black teachers, administrators, and 17 southern states lost their jobs. A lot of it because they closed the black schools, an idea to create a school that was integrated, but some of it was also payback for being involved in some of the civil rights movement. I'm going to skip this. But here's also the significance about data, and I'm sure Dr. Heckman talked about this, about qualifications. 85% of minority teachers, when they were pursuing jobs after Brown, had college degrees compared to 75% of white teachers. So they had the credentials, but they didn't have the opportunity. What's happened in the 21st century? 105,000 bachelor's degrees were conferred in education in the beginning of this decade. Only 7,000, nearly 400 were awarded to blacks. So the whole shift to other professions changed dramatically. It's improving now, but that is a big sign of the loss of that nucleus in the black community made a big difference. And so as a result of that, black children were left without expertise of the more qualified black teachers, but also the psychological and emotional void as well when they walk into the classroom and don't see anyone like them, and many of them don't succeed. And here's Dr. Edward Rhymes made this at a conference we had in Dartmouth. Although segregation wasn't imposed in the racial system, blacks were able to create a functional system in spite of it. And I go back to Rosa Parks and talk about the consequences. People forget about after Brown, there was a whole lot of Marshall thinking his work was done. And then this is probably one of the most significant cases. In fact, I'll tell you, October 12th through 14th, 2012, at Harvard Law School, we will be re-examining the 1957 Aaron versus Hoover case with Justice Stephen Breyer and several other circuit judges who will have most of the Little Rock time. I'll say three things about it. Number one, it was a tenuous decision by the Supreme Court in 1958 saying, if you don't let the black students into Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, then we're going to make sure that the federal troops are going in there. Well, the person who was in the White House then, remember, was Dwight Eisenhower. Eisenhower was skeptical of the Brown decision. Thought it had many setbacks and was not really something ready for the South to embrace. But he did send troops to make sure that these students could go to Little Rock High School. Now, what's significant about Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, what's central about it, people don't realize, 9 students, half black male and half black female, were admitted. Ernie Green, who's still an active businessman in Washington, D.C., was the oldest. Every single one of those students who went to Central High School in 1957 graduated. When you think about all the pressure and the trauma of going through all of this, being called names, being escorted by troops to get into a school, a public school in 1957, it wasn't very comfortable. And then they not only finished high school, all of them went to college, and some of them received PhDs after their college education. So it showed that the experiment worked. If you give them the opportunity to learn, they will in any environment, and they will be a part of this conference in October if you're able to come. And the final thing about Aaron versus Hoover is that, as we will see, some of the same segregation that we saw in public schools in the 20th century is rejoined us in the 21st century. I'll talk about that just at the end. And here are the consequences of trying to fight for equality of justice. Medgar Evers was assassinated in his own front yard as his family, his wife and children watched after being involved in demonstration for equality in Mississippi. Dr. King, as you may remember, gave the phenomenal address, the March on Washington address, on August 28, 1963. And I want you to plant that seed in your mind. The irony of all this is just an irony that August 27th, we heard the death of W.B. Du Bois, not in Massachusetts, not in New York, but in Ghana. He abandoned the United States, feeling that they weren't really committed to the issues of social justice and equality, and disappeared to Africa, joined the Communist Party, and then died on August 27th. This coming August 2013, not this year, but next year, will be the 50th anniversary of both the March on Washington and the 100th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation that was issued by President Lincoln in 1860.